Right.
Hey, Dave, welcome to the show. As a way of getting started, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, Brian, definitely appreciate you taking the time. So my name's Dave DeRosa. I have about 10 years of experience in enterprise SaaS sales. I started in the music industry, moved into the trucking industry, and then law enforcement sales. And now I am selling into hedge funds. So a little bit of a
Wow.
varied past.
Wow. Which one's the hardest?
Well, I just started my job here with the hedge funds, so I'm still ramping up and understanding that. I would say selling into government and police was absolutely the most difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. I sold into federal
Hmm.
government, but when I talk to any state and local,
Yeah, whole different world.
well, a whole different world and really difficult.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Why
Yeah.
why did you find it difficult? I have my reasons.
Well, what I hear is, the budgets are really tight, very
Always.
political,
Yeah.
um, in a long sales cycle. Like you got to
Yes.
sell a year in advance,
Yes.
and hard to keep the momentum going.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think that actually plays into a lot of the things that I hear a lot of your viewers say is it's important to have multiple stakeholders, right? So
Yes.
that is the one thing I learned very quickly in that role is just because you have somebody that really likes you and that you get along with really well, it was blaringly obvious that if you don't have 4 or 5 people that have 4 or 5 different jobs at that organization, holy cow, talk about a crash course.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
I think that's a natural trap that we all fall into. We,
yeah.
we, we tend to, what I call, go steady with somebody at the
Yeah,
account.
that's a good point. It's dating, right? Sales is dating.
Yeah. But as soon as you start doing that, unless that person really has the political power and the know-how to get it done,
Hmm.
it, it most likely will stall, and they're not going to tell you till it's too late,
Yeah,
and you don't have the perspective of the other people who are involved.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's they don't want the egg on their face, but also, I mean, even if that person does have the pull, I don't know how many times I've been in, actually, I can probably count a couple of times I've been in a situation where I was with the person, I was with the signature, but it didn't matter because
Doesn't
there
matter.
were other obstacles that got in the way. And all of a sudden, it's like, what are you talking about? You told me last week we were getting a signature by the end of the quarter, and here we are pushing it out. Or
Right.
it's not like you don't have the money. You just don't have the money for this project.
Right. They always have the money. It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
the biggest excuse out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, selling to hedge funds, what's that like?
It's interesting. So it's actually, I shouldn't say just hedge funds. It's been institutional asset managers, really just in the financial space. So right now I'm working with a CRM that's designed specifically for asset management professionals. So it's a niche market, but it's actually been really interesting. I find that going from police officers and government officials to CEOs of asset management is not actually as far of a stretch as you might think, as far as people who are willing to push back very quickly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
bet.
yeah, absolutely. But it's been interesting. It's obviously a very complex industry, but there are a lot of balls you got to keep in the air.
Yeah.
Regulations, compliance, competition. It's a very flooded market as far as CRM goes. You have to really differentiate. So it's been interesting so far.
And what do you typically compete against? Is there an in-house solution, or do they just use Salesforce, or do they?
Yeah. I hope it's an in-house solution because then I can come at them with 1,000 things that we're doing better.
Yeah.
Um, Salesforce is out there. That's the big gorilla in the room, and I'm sure they know that there's the target on their back from anybody, not just the small guys, but also the mid-market type guys.
Yeah.
So Salesforce is absolutely dominating the market. What I find to be interesting is just because they're the gorilla doesn't mean that they're the best product. I find that uh, nobody got fired for signing a Salesforce contract, right? And
Yeah.
that's usually you're fighting against the fear, uncertainty, and doubt of jumping off a ledge into something different and potentially better versus just not rocking the boat. So that's
Yeah.
been an interesting conversation to have.
And how do you approach it?
Sometimes that's a good question. I guess sometimes you can't be a bull in a china shop, but you have to show value quickly and
Yeah.
understandably. So it's clear, concise, respect the person on the other line, right? Hey, I understand this is your situation. Um, may I have 15 minutes of your time? I'd like to learn a little bit more about your organization. I'm not coming to you as a salesperson. I'm coming to you as someone genuinely curious about what you do.
Yeah.
And if there's a match, let's have the conversation. Let's make you more money, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And that's what they care about.
It's all about the bottom line at the end of the day, especially in this industry.
Yeah. It's very quantifiable too.
It's something, I mean, yeah, that's the thing. Like
It's
they're all money.
live
Yeah.
bottom of the line.
Yeah. And they know I'm a sales guy at the end of the day. They know what motivates me and I know what motivates them. So that's something we can relate to.
And how did you come to this approach versus just this is who we are. This is what we do. This is why you need us.
Yeah, so at my last position, I had the benefit and luxury of being surrounded by probably some of the smartest people I've ever met. Yeah. And that's not just in a sales perspective. That's just, I mean, business school or not, school of hard knocks, real life, whatever it is. I was surrounded by people and I just tried to keep my ears open. They were willing to teach. I was willing to listen, and watching the real killers, the real people that are really just consistently every year over year mutilating their pipeline. Yeah. Those are the people I tried to just absorb as much as I could from.
And what were they doing differently?
So one person who I really have a lot of respect for was at one point in his life an interrogator, an intelligence interrogator in the Marines. And I like to think he probably knew a little bit more about the human psyche than the average Joe. But the things that they were doing differently, I think tripling down on their strengths. Yeah. It's one of the best pieces of advice I ever got in my life, is tripling down on your strengths. Not only knowing what you suck at, but knowing what you're really, really great at, and then being the person in that particular skill. Some people, it's being outgoing. Some people, it's they can see numbers like Rain Man. And and other people, it's just they're really good at seeing what other people are good at. And I found that if they understood what they were good at, and then they were able to bundle that into the artistry that is their sale, they were rock solid. Common wins for folks like that: the attention to detail or the ability to feel out people. I think that's where it really segments from 1 to 2. You can go one of both ways. Very few times do people always have 100% of both. Yeah. So I feel like if you were really good at understanding who had the juice, or you were really good at knowing every single minute what had to happen throughout the entire process, that was your branch. And I saw that work really well for those folks.
Because a lot of people try and pitch the opposite of that. Take your weaknesses and try and build them up.
I hate that.
But then you kind of become mediocre at everything because you're not super great at anything.
Yeah. So now you're like an 8 hitter on like the last place team, right? Like you're good at a couple of things, but no one ever says, wow, yeah, that guy's really great at, I'm going to give that guy a call because he's great at that. And people could feel that out. People aren't idiots, especially in our world, right? Like they can feel it. So
and managers kind of push to that too.
Why do you think that is?
I think they want soldiers versus superstars.
Yeah. Yeah. Right? Which, I mean, I've watched your videos. That's like the exact opposite of what
happens naturally. Naturally, they're superstars.
Yeah.
So why fight it?
Yeah. Which is ridiculous. You just let them run. Let them run.
Let them run and encourage them about what they are great at, and double down, triple down on it. Yeah, if they're not good at prospecting and they're great at enterprise deals, give them the enterprise.
That's it. And then give them a hell of a BDR.
Yeah.
Right. Like, so my philosophy, just from what I've picked up in that regard, is that I think great managers are the ones who can identify those strengths and then bundle those teams together in a great way. Now, obviously you have your head count that you have to fill in, and you have your metrics that the board always needs to see, all that good stuff. Sure. But at the end of the day, if you can create a team, that's when the sum becomes greater than the parts.
Yeah. And that's because they all complain about data entry into a CRM. And it's like, hey, how about hire a 50K a year person to go and talk to them every day?
You get it.
Polish.
Oh my God.
Why make everyone spend 20% of their time doing it?
Yeah. And that's kind of the thing. Like I'm a baseball guy, so every great hitter needs to know how to bunt. right? Like you just need to know how to lay one down. But you're not asking, I'm a Yankees fan. You're not asking Alex Rodriguez to bunt. You know what I mean? Like, it's not going to happen. So surround him with the people that are capable of doing that, but let him swing for the fences, man. And that's what it comes down to.
And who's always the worst hitter on the team? It's the pitcher, right? And no one cares.
But that doesn't matter because they're really great. I think you shared something the other day where it was like a monkey, a fish, and like a horse were taking the same test, and it's climb this tree. And it's like, well, the fish is screwed, but guess what? The monkey's not so good at swimming. Yeah. Guess what? The horse is terrible at. Both of them. Like, it's a matter of finding that balance, and I think it's a matter of luck and skill getting into that position. But once you find it, milk it.
And I think that's really what people are talking about when they say authenticity. Because it's if you are good at humor, or you're good at storytelling, or talking about sports and building rapport, run with it.
Do it if that's your game.
Don't hide it.
Yeah.
Don't put the suit on and just smiling nod. Yes, sir.
It's so obvious, right?
Yeah.
Like how many times it's almost like when you see the presidential. We have all this political everything going on right now, and all of a sudden you see Joe Biden's doing a speech in a t-shirt or with his sleeves rolled up, and it's like. Yeah, because when he's in the boardroom, he's not a killer. Okay, right? Like he's just an everyday guy. And that's what it is. And it's a matter of sure, you want to find the quickest way from A to B to relate to someone, but at the end of the day, people are going to call you out on it if you're not you.
Right, because phoniness comes across very clear. I think we got a pretty good radar for that.
Yeah, and buyers, I've at least seen in situations where buyers will find that out quickly, and they'll say, well, if this guy is lying about who he is or what they do, why should I believe them about why their product is gonna take away my pain, make me feel better about my day?
Right, because trust doesn't come immediately.
You have to
build it up.
Yeah,
and the way to build it up is to become known, liked by giving before taking. And building rapport is talking about the other person and what they care about, what they're interested in.
Yeah, that matters. I heard a story the other day where someone was, they were talking about how they were dating, right? And it was like they just shut up. They didn't say a word about them. They didn't say anything about what they were great at, how much money they made, how great their job was, all that didn't matter. And end of the date, oh man, I had the best time of my life. They didn't say a word.
Right.
Remember, some of the best advice I ever got is if you can get through a discovery call without mentioning your product once, you're in business.
Right. Because nobody trains people on the questions. They all train them on what points to make.
Yeah. Check off the boxes, pick the drop-down menu.
How are we different than the competitor? It's like, well, you're not even there yet.
It doesn't even matter. It's all about what is your pain and how can I help you solve it at a cheaper rate than you're doing today?
Yeah.
That's it.
And what do you like about your current job?
It's challenging. It's challenging. And I say that as a good thing because I feel like you got to be hungry, right? So I went from a company that was the gorilla in the room. I walked in and they were like, oh yeah, it's the best product. I was the equivalent of a sales force. And now it's like, kind of have to justify my existence to these folks, right? And you only have an elevator ride to do it. Yeah. But the beauty is there are thousands of elevators in the world. So it's so that's what's exciting to me is it's kind of going out into the Wild West a little bit more. Yeah. I have an awesome team behind me, which is really cool. And they're a little bit more junior than me. So I am getting my toe starting to dip into the management cycle and the coaching and the mentoring, which is something I'm truly passionate about. Yeah. So that's been exciting too, is to say, hey, maybe you should tweak your email or your voicemail or that way. And to see even a little bit of improvement is so cool.
Yeah. Do you have any inbound?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Not as much as I'm used to, but that's okay. That's okay. So
how much is inbound versus outbound?
I'd say 20% inbound minimum or maximum. And that's a good week. And that's because our marketing guy just really started turning it. He turned the nozzle up.
Yeah.
He's been kicking butt. So yeah, but it's cool though, right? Like it's a whole blank slate, which is pretty exciting.
And what's your territory?
Right now, Eastern region,
Yeah.
focusing on New York City, focusing on Toronto, the major financial centers, but really the plan is to just expand out. Yeah.
That's a big patch. How do you prioritize your time?
That's a great question. And I think that's the age-old sales question, right? Is like there are 24 hours in the day, a couple of which you have to spend with your significant other or your sanity or your hobby, whatever it is. Pesky, yeah, I know. I got to walk the damn dog. But the time prioritization is important, right? So I think you need to divide your day, at least the way I've done it and I've found success in it, is you got to divide your day into what are your revenue generating activities. You have to really focus on, am I increasing the bottom line? A great quote I heard was, what are you doing today to improve the stock of the company? Yeah. What are you doing to increase shareholder value? And the way I think that's done is you identify innately, very quickly, how bad a lead is, and don't be afraid to throw it back in the water ASAP. Yeah. Right? So like, I find a lot of sales reps get mired in the fact that they feel like they need to make every call the call. But you need to be able to say, we're not a good, I've actually said this to prospects. I don't think we're a good fit. I don't want to waste your time or mine. Right. If this happens, give me a call back or I'll check back with you in a year or two. But for now, I don't think it's a good fit.
That's it. I think everyone looks at every lead as equal.
Not even close. Not equal. Yeah.
Right. Not you got to be like a detective. Who's most likely to buy?
That was my father's profession. I'm not even kidding. He was a detective, and that's exactly it.
Yeah.
It was exactly it. It's like, you need to be able to understand, like, there are 1,000 leads in front of you.
Right.
20 of them are making your number.
Boom.
That's it.
Right. Out of that 1,000, who's most likely to be those 20?
Give me those 20, fill up my pipeline with the 100 that have the same pieces, the same qualifications, the same identity as those 20. And that's where you get 120, 150, 200% quota, is when all of a sudden those 20 close, and now you get those extra 10 or 15 that are there.
Because it drives me crazy when I talk to a sales leader who's got the sales math. And I usually, because there was a murder in my town a couple years ago.
Oh God.
And I read the reports, and I'm a crime freak. I love watching crime shows.
We could talk all day about that.
I love crime.
I sold body cameras, man.
and I was in the store next to where it happened that night. About
scary, right?
5 hours earlier.
Scary.
And I read the report, and the police were interviewing all the people that were on the camera that night. Mm-hmm. And they thought it was a robbery. And I'm like, this goes to sales, because they were looking for the wrong motive. Like, people don't kill anybody over what's in a cash register.
Well, not smart people, at least.
in a nice town, right?
Yeah.
And it was the night they introduced the iPad, and the Apple store was right next to them. And you're like, well, wait a second. Everyone's walking around with $1,000.
Here's A, here's B.
Walking up and down the street with, if it was money motivated, they would have robbed everyone with their iPads, put them on eBay. And who pays with cash?
Not for that. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
So it's not robbery. And it took the police 2 weeks to figure this out. And I'm like, and if you look at it like a salesperson, you would go and interview everybody and circle out. If you're dumb. Yeah. Well, and person goes, why would anyone do this?
Exactly. That's when you get the manager or the person who's like, just make $1,000 a day, spray and pray, throw as much bird shot in the air, and hope that you hit a clay bird. No.
Yeah, and if you use the detective model, you're going to exhaust yourself doing dumb things.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
In a murder, who's closest to the person? Mm-hmm. Physically, emotionally, financially, who has motive, right? And it took them 2 months to figure it out. It was the coworker.
Where they could have went from day one. Oh, this makes sense. This makes sense. Yeah.
Because it was overkill.
Yeah.
right? And robbery doesn't cause overkill. Overkill is an emotional response. It's not a logical response,
Interesting.
right? You're not
Interesting.
going to
Yeah.
overkill over a couple $100 in
No, of
cash.
course not. Of course not. Yeah. Now it's funny. It's funny you say that because I have had the benefit of working with some really amazing policemen and women.
Yeah,
I mean, and their departments. And sales is not crime fighting, but
right.
it also kind of, like, from that perspective, it
It's
also kind of is.
detective.
It's amazing to see. I mean, the ways that these people can connect the dots in an intelligent way. If that's the way, I don't want to call it strategic, but I mean, you kind of said it before, like a little more of an intuitive, intelligent approach to the process
It's
that'll get you to the
motive.
finish
Who
line.
has the
Yeah,
motive to you're looking for the people who are most likely to buy your product in the
sure,
time frame of your comp plan,
sure.
right? 3
Yeah,
years from now, it doesn't matter. It will.
doesn't mean anything. It
Right?
doesn't mean anything. I need it this year, preferably before December.
Yes.
Yep.
So you're going to start to profile on that
Mm-hmm.
and build interest about that, and you're going to get signals that this person can be in market within this time frame.
Sure, sure.
You're spraying and praying and putting your, that's marketing.
That's all luck.
Uh, right. You might happen to find the person at
Yeah.
that time.
I've got a guy who he was cold calling, and he literally said, like, I am shocked I called them. They picked up the phone, and now we have this project that we're on the 30-yard line. We're almost in the red zone. It's like,
Yeah.
he's like, yeah, I was shocked. And I said, don't get used to that. It doesn't happen as often as you
Right.
think,
Right.
unless you have an auto dialer, and no one wants to pick up the phone for that. So
That's it. So you got to profile those 20
yep,
and work them smart
yep,
because that's your energy.
yep,
You can't
absolutely.
get a 25th hour.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's absolutely right. And the beauty is, everyone in the history of life has always had those same 24 hours, right? So,
Right. And that's why I always viewed sales as much more of a judgment prioritization.
mm-hmm.
And now too
Yeah,
many reps look at it as binary. This lead's qualified, is not qualified. It's like, how
no,
qualified is it?
no,
Right.
yeah. And then it comes, once you get to that stage of actually qualifying, I believe it comes down to how good of an educator are you?
Right.
How much do you know about your craft, and how
Yeah.
good are you at teaching someone about it?
And how receptive are they to it? If they're
Yeah.
not receptive and someone else is, that's more qualified.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, more. I am more receptive. Great.
Yeah, they will meet you. That's more qualified.
That's sometimes all it takes. Yeah,
Yeah.
I went through some really. It was pretty great sales training where it was focused on selling to different personality types. So, you and I say you and I because I think we're the same. We're expressors, right? We're people that we communicate via emotion. We communicate via being able to see, hear, tone, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. But there are buyers that they see a spreadsheet and it either makes sense or it doesn't. Or they have their team and they're wondering, is my team going to benefit from this? They care more about that. I find that being able to identify that type of personality is half the battle. And
Yeah.
once you identify that, so as an expressor, talking to someone who's an analyzer, they might get overwhelmed by hey, I'm Dave, let's talk about
Right.
everything right now. You need to be able to kind of pull into their corner a little bit and
You're the
understand.
chameleon. Yeah.
That's it. The sales chameleon. It's a good name
Right.
for a book.
That's it. I sold mostly to technical people, and
Okay.
so they were much more on the analytical side, but there was always a win emotion for them, which was their career. They wanted to
Interesting.
they wanted to use the hottest technology because it helped their career, their value.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
So if
And
you
then when
sold,
it's successful, they can say, "Hey, I was on the cutting edge of this."
yeah, exactly. They go to get their next job. I've used this. They put it on their resume. It's a
Hmm.
resume builder.
Of course.
Yeah. And in your market, I'm not sure what it is. You probably know better than I, of course, but it might be, control over their customer base.
It helps. I mean, I think it's pretty straightforward in the finance world is make your customers more money because that means you make more money,
Yeah.
right? In the police world before this, it was actually really similar to what you just said. I would work with a lot of sergeants or lieutenants who, I mean, if they implemented a successful body camera program, they oftentimes got promoted. And you bet your butt I would talk about that during a meeting.
Well,
I would say.
that's it. You see the documentaries where they have body cam
Mhm.
recordings,
Yeah.
right? It takes the he said, she said out of it.
right out of it. It's an incredible technology, and I feel lucky to be able to work with it, to have worked with it. But it was from the motivation standpoint, when you're really trying to ingrain your champion, and your champion is like, I'm on the fence. And it's like, well, the last 3 sergeants I worked with got promoted to lieutenant. That got you an extra couple of dollar signs on your paycheck. And guess what? Now one owns a house, another one went on a beautiful trip with their wife, blah, blah, blah. And it's like kind of tapping into that emotion, but still being on their side. I'm not trying to manipulate. It's just like, hey, you're kind of cutting off the nose to spite your face if you're not talking to me.
Well, I mean, I think it should be required by law that they have them, because it eliminates all
I couldn't agree more. It's an incredible technology.
It makes everybody behave better.
The amount of times someone would call or text me long after a sale and say, thank God we had this. Like, it saved us an internal investigation. It saved us everything. All of a sudden, it's a lot less about the dollars you're saving from the liability to the city or anything along those lines. And all of a sudden, it becomes really real. Yes. And now it's something that affects your family. I told you before, my father was a police officer, and there were a lot of times where it was like, there's an internal investigation, gotta walk on eggshells, and to have a tool that can show truth in such an amazing way, in a situation where
emotion is just over.
99.9% of people would have no clue what to do. It's incredible.
Yeah. It's incredible. And a lot of these things I watch on like YouTube super slow.
Yeah. 10 times back and forth. Yeah.
Right. How bad of a mistake was it, or how could it have been prevented? My
favorite, I encourage you and all of your listeners to do this. Go on YouTube and just search for, like, when a reporter is brought in to go through a police stress test, and they put them through situations where you're making a literal life and death decision or a no decision in less than 2 seconds. And 2 seconds is a long time. Yeah. There was one where the reporter her fake gun over her head just shooting into the air. And that was her reaction. She was like, I will never talk poorly about police on the news again.
Right. Yeah. That's it. Cool.
It's incredible. So I get a little emotional about that because it's something that I care very much about, but yeah.
Yeah. And what are some of the milestones in your sales career, the real kind of epiphanies that you've had?
Yeah. Well, I think the one thing I've always learned epiphany-wise is always be skeptical.
Of other people or yourself?
Of the deal. Okay. Always be skeptical of when things are closed. And there have been times, and you say milestones, and I think milestone can go both ways. It can be a teachable moment, or it can be something where I closed a huge deal and it was awesome, and I saw a big commission check, and that was great too. Yeah. But I remember I could have swore up and down, and this was my quota maker. It was like December 15th. I was like 300K shy, and this deal I had in the pipe was 450. It was my quota maker. I was ready to rock. I got the verbal confirmation from 3 decision makers and finance saying, yep, we have the money. We're going to go through with this. It'll be signed before the end of the year. Great. Let's start planning our trip to the Caribbean. This is going to be awesome. I can't wait. Well, guess what? Nothing happened. And the days kept going, and the days kept going. And my guy goes on vacation. He comes back, and all of a sudden, sorry, got deprioritized at the last minute. It's December. Nothing I could do. You just got to lick your wounds and go home. So I know that's going to be strange to say from a milestone capability.
Well, no, that's actually really well, because people get too comfortable hearing what they want to hear. Mm-hmm. And there was probably some decision point there that, and plus state and locals, it's not their money.
Yeah.
And they're there for their pensions. They're there for whatever
Don't
reason.
Rock the boat. Yep. Yeah. You're right.
Right. It's very political. These people who are going to have to work together for 20 years.
Yeah. Like literally, like you're, all right, I guess we're here.
Yeah, we're here.
You're tenured? Crap, me too. All right, well.
Right. And, they don't switch jobs very often.
No, of course not.
Yeah.
And it's political too. But yeah, that was a big moment, because it was, some of the best advice I ever got was always be skeptical. The money doesn't exist until it's in your company's checking account.
Yeah. And that exists too in commercial space as well.
Yeah.
But the more complex the organization, the more likely it is to flake at some point.
Yeah. Well, on the flip side of that, I think you asked me earlier, what do the best people do really well that make them the quota crushers? And I think the answer to that is they handle that situation that you just said with gold stars across the board every minute of every day.
Yeah.
And I think that's an experience thing, that's a talent thing, and that's just kind of understanding your customer and your product and the relationship between the two to an expert level.
Yeah, that's it. Because when I sold federal, I would go on to the internet and I would find out how the procurement officers, what they have to do. They had FARs and DFARs, federal acquisition regulations. I would read them all. And I go, which FARs matter to you? They go, what's a FAR? Right. And I go, let me show you.
Yeah. And then you got to find out who you're talking to.
Then on our side, I'd have to tell the people who book it on our side, you got to just book it. And they'd be like, well, we can't adhere to this. And it's like, do you want the money?
Yeah, seriously. Like at the end of the day, like where are the numbers coming from? Yeah.
Right.
It's crazy. Yeah.
And if you can't walk the people through that, it's going to get stuck sometimes.
Yeah.
And we get too comfortable thinking we're talking to the guy and the guy will get it done for us.
That's right.
And if it's selling something new, especially like body cam, if it's not a new purchase versus a repeat.
That's right.
This is change.
It's change, and change is scary.
Change is scary.
And it doesn't matter if you're gov, private, or somewhere in between.
Right.
Change is scary. Because like I said before, no one ever got fired for selling Salesforce or for buying Salesforce, right? Like it's one of those things. So I think, and you preach this constantly, is the ability to educate and walk your customer through their buying process.
Yeah.
And getting, I mean, that doesn't mean just holding their hand and saying, okay, let's go for a walk. It's you told me your site, you need this implemented by this date. Let's work backwards. This is what the reality of the situation is. Are you sure you still want this date?
Yeah.
And it's incredible actually listening to you and all of the people that you interview. I mean, that seems to be the common thread is taking ownership of that process and caring about it and kind of, I mean, not to sound hokey, but being a little obsessed about it.
You have to, right? Because you put all that work into it. And when the default is to not do anything versus do something, these deals, maybe not lost, but delayed certainly. And that's, you lost all your time.
Time kills all deals. Kills everything, but it really kills.
It does kill everything.
But it really kills all deals. Sometimes that cost of doing nothing isn't enough to get that signature on the line. So,
cool.
And that's something I think we can all continually learn, right? Like just take.
Oh yeah, no one's ever going to be perfect at it.
You're never going to be perfect at it. Right. So like I said,
and a lot of the people in the process add value by slowing it down. And coming up with reasons not to do it.
Oh yeah. In Fed, how many times did a procurement officer say, hey, you filled out 403B, we needed 403X and 302D. Like
the number of times I've heard, I've got 45 days to issue this. Mm-hmm. Don't rush me. And I'm like, okay, it's going to take 45 seconds to hit the button.
But my quarter's over in 30 days. You don't understand.
It's over in 3 days.
I had a guy literally pocket veto a deal for a quarter because he was like, I can't stand sales guys. I'm like, he's like, I know what you're trying to do. I'm like, I know you know what I'm trying to do. Can you please respect that I have a mouth to feed? He's like, no, I couldn't care less. Yeah. But it's pretty incredible to see kind of that growth. You just, the people that do it right are the ones that understand that process. And I, for one, I mean, there's time. I know I'm not perfect. So, that's what it comes down to. Cool.
Hey, where can people go to connect with you?
Yeah. So you can follow me on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/Dave DeRosa. That's probably the best place to get in touch with me.